Preparatory Committee for the 2020 NPT Review Conference. Before continuing with the consideration of the revised draft recommendations, I would like to inform delegations that subsequent to the adoption of the final report of the Preparatory Committee for the 2020 Review Conference, one additional delegation has informed the Secretariat of its participation. If there are no objections, I intend to add them to the list of participants and amend paragraph 9 of the final report. I see no objection. It is so decided. We will now continue the consideration of the revised draft recommendations contained in NPT/Conf 2020/PC3 CRP4 Ref1. Due to time constraints, I ask states parties to provide their comments on the document as a whole. As I mentioned before adjourning yesterday's meeting, 10 speakers remain on my list. Philippines, Australia, Netherlands, Japan, Venezuela, Canada, Norway, Poland, Guatemala, Hungary. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Philippines.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good morning, colleagues. The Philippines fully aligns itself with the statement delivered by Indonesia on behalf of NAM yesterday. We join delegations in commending you, Mr. Chair, and your team for coming up with a revised draft, which we, like other delegations, consider to be a stronger draft, a much improved basis for work on an outcome document that will endorse recommendations for the review conference. My delegation can support this draft, but we understand that delegations will need to continue to engage and achieve a consensus on it. In the past 2 weeks, we have heard an overwhelming number of delegations state the following. 1, that we wanted to affirm previous commitments and as well pursue forward-looking actions. 2nd, that we wanted to give the message that we are moving forward, not backward. And that we wanted to see actions on the 3 pillars of the treaty being pursued in an equally progressive manner. We think that this revised draft properly captures this sense of purpose. We see that more than the first draft, it is strongly rooted on the commitments we made in the 64-point action plan agreed in 2010. Indeed, it gives the positive message that as we head to 2020, we are collectively committed to implement our obligations across the 3 pillars with a level of ambition befitting the 50th anniversary of the treaty. We thank you, Mr. Chair, for your hard work on this document, which is an important deliverable of this PrepCom meeting, and we assure you of our delegation's continued support as you bring this meeting into its successful conclusion. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Philippines for her intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Australia.
Thank you, Chair. We have achieved quite a lot at this PrepCom. The third PrepCom is about getting our house in order procedurally, and we have done that and set the foundations for 2020. We endorse the comments by Chile and others about the importance of listening to the views in the room. We commend your team, who have worked professionally and diligently and been very accessible to delegates throughout this process. This has helped set a mostly positive tone and facilitated good discussions on substance. Like others, we feel the document has moved away from the balance of the initial draft and is consequently less of a basis for consensus. We thank you for including some of NPDI's suggestions, including some of the sensible suggestions provided from the floor. From a first read, there are elements of your document that we like, but there are also elements which concern us, such as the revised language on the additional protocol, which we could not accept. Time is short, but the discussion we have had has helped to build understanding of each other's positions, where we agree and where we do not. That in itself is helpful for 2020. Chair, if you decide to submit a working paper, we respectfully suggest it be based on your first draft, which was a more balanced text. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Australia for her intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Netherlands.
Mr. Chair, like others before us, we would like to thank you and your team for your hard work in drafting this revised version of the draft recommendations. Mr. Chair, we agree with the sentiment expressed yesterday by our colleague from Finland, especially with regard to our support for the NPT and our efforts to achieve a successful outcome of this review cycle. And we have come a substantial way with regard to procedure, as just explained by our Australian colleague. We also agree with our German colleague yesterday that the balance that was so skillfully drafted on the sensitive issues has now been diluted. Mr. Chair, we do see some improvements in the text, for instance, with regard to transparency and with regard to risk reduction. But we also see some significant changes that are a concern to us. One example is the text on the additional protocol, as also mentioned by the UAE and Australia before us. We also regret some general changes in the balance compared to the first text, which we, along with several others, found to capture well the range of views expressed. All in all, Mr. Chair, we think this version of the recommendations does not reflect in a balanced way what was said on the floor. We appreciate any effort to achieve consensus as per the mandate of the PrepCom. But consensus means a state of non-objection by all states parties, not the opinion of many or even the majority. We feel the first version, better approached that goal of reaching consensus. To conclude, Mr. Chair, we think further work is possible on the basis of the previous draft. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Netherlands for her intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Japan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My delegation would like to express Japan's sincere gratitude to you and your team for your dedicated.
Microphone for Japan, please.
We appreciated that. The delegation would like to express Japan's sincere gratitude to you and your team for your dedicated efforts. We appreciated that the first draft, although it did not consistently make use of customary expressions, recognized what we had done well and was presented as a simple but solid basis to explore how to converge our different views in this forum. Reading the second draft, however, while we appreciate that some of our comments have been duly reflected, we express our concern on the draft. Some, not a few, claims on which common understanding among us haven't been made are emphasized. On non-proliferation and regional issues, we noticed that reference to such issues as the additional protocol, Article 28, 29, and 30, and the JCPOA, Article 59, are weakened in comparison with the first draft. Therefore, we are of the view that our previous discussions are not reflected in a balanced and inclusive manner. Listening to diversified views are important, but I have the impression the views of those who respected the chair's request to work in the spirit of compromise and convey practical comments were not heard well. We believe that the current draft should have been an action-oriented one, as the chair had originally envisioned. We are not clear where and how the chair plans to reach consensus. We are of the view that what is important now is to objectively review how past commitments have been implemented and to continue examining the concrete and practical methods of fulfilling them, with the sincere engagement of the nuclear weapon states and cooperation of all states. Japan believes that such an approach does not constitute any disregard for the previously agreed documents. With regard to nuclear disarmament, in addressing issues on which common understanding hasn't been formed, we'd like to emphasize the importance of the engagement of all state parties, engagement with one another to advance nuclear disarmament, in spite of the differences, as stated in the Kyoto Appeal of the Group of Eminent Persons. We hope that such an approach will help to restore cooperation. On nuclear non-proliferation and regional issues, we should continue to improve our response to existing challenges. In particular, in relation to North Korea, while we appreciate some of our comments were reflected, we are of the view that further improvement in line with our earlier comments should be made. Under the cooperation of the 3 preparatory committee chairs and the president of the review conference, we would like to see a constructive and forward-looking atmosphere fostered to advance discussion on our common goals. Japan will continue its efforts in all 3 pillars, including the activities of the group of eminent persons, and is ready to cooperate with as many countries as possible. Implementation is important, but in order to make it happen, interaction and interactive discussion and creative innovations are absolutely needed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the distinguished representative of Japan for his intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Venezuela. A microphone for Venezuela.
Listo. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My delegation would like to endorse the statements made by the delegation of Indonesia on behalf of the non-aligned movement countries on this new proposed document. And we would also like to most especially recognize the detailed, patient, and transparent and balanced manner in which you and your team have made enormous efforts in order to get this new text approved. We believe that while it could still be improved in many areas, this text has evolved and serves as a significant basis for ongoing discussions amongst our delegations. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Venezuela for her intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Canada.
Good morning, colleagues, and thank you, Chair. And thank you for your efforts and the respectful tone that you have set in the conduct of these meetings these 2 weeks. As we indicated to you, we were prepared to support the first draft. While it was imperfect and didn't always reflect our views, it was a good, balanced foundation for negotiations. With respect to the second draft, we thank you for reflecting the reviews expressed by the NPDI on the need for time in the review conference to advance processes for strengthening the NPT throughout its cycle. There are areas in the draft where you have advanced some commonly held positions, as my Finnish colleagues and German and other Dutch colleagues have already said. However, there are 2 specific areas where we would have little room for flexibility in negotiation, and another which is highly problematic. And so all in, draft 1 gave us more opportunity to reach a consensus outcome. That said, we appreciate your effort to articulate where there is common ground and to steward the interventions that reveal where there is room for negotiation and on differing held positions, and also then to bring clarity on areas which will continue to challenge our ability in this room to reach consensus. We look forward to understanding your thoughts and decisions as we close the final preparation committee today, and how these 2 weeks will be reflected and contribute to the actions and discussions in the next 12 months leading to the review conference. We thank you again for your work and that of the team and the Secretariat. The Canadian team continues to stand ready for the work ahead in the coming months and to support the work of the Chair-designate in this regard. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Canada for her intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Norway.
Thank you, Chair. Like others, I would like to commend you on your efforts. We have had 2 weeks of very constructive work, thanks to your leadership. We congratulated you on your first version of draft recommendations earlier this week, which in our view was a well-balanced document. We still consider this as a solid base to work towards consensus. For the second version, we appreciate that the issue of shipping and coastal state dialogue has been included. Even so, we find that the second version is moving away from that good balance that we saw in the first version, both within the sections and between the sections. The softening of language on the additional protocol is of special concern. I would like to associate with those views yesterday and today, especially Finland, Germany, and Netherlands, calling to revert to your first draft as the basis of our work. Time is running out though, so we are in your hands, Chair. Thank you, Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Norway for his intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Poland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would like also to commend you for your leadership and efforts to keep good atmosphere of the discussion. On the new draft text itself, I will be very brief. Mr. Chair, current text is very much unbalanced and does not constitute basis for the discussion and takes us far away from any compromise. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Poland for his intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Guatemala.
Gracias, señor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, like other delegations who spoke before me, I'd like to congratulate you once again and your team and the Secretariat for the work done and the manner in which you have conducted our work. We are aware of the fact that it was not an easy task. My delegation joins the statement made yesterday by the distinguished delegation of Indonesia yesterday on behalf of the non-aligned movement countries. We also fully agree with what was said by Brazil. With regard to the document, we think that CRP4 Rev 1 reflects a number of elements presented by delegations in their general statements and thematic groups and in the first revision of the document. And we believe that the themes could be bolstered, but my delegation can be flexible in this regard. Generally speaking, we see a document that we can support with the elements as presented. My delegation is pleased that a number of paragraphs have been strengthened, such as the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of the use of nuclear weapons and the support and importance of the NPT and other supporting treaties. We also support the 3 pillars of the NPT, which reinforce each other mutually. We also join the reference in Resolution 1325 of the United Nations GA. With regard as the peaceful uses of nuclear energy, we believe that what was said by delegations was taken into account and it's quite well balanced compared to the previous document. Generally speaking, Mr. Chairman, we believe that these recommendations would serve as a good basis for the work that awaits us in the NPT conference next year. Mr. Chairman, once again, we reiterate our congratulations to you and assure you that you can count on the constructive support of my delegation.
I thank the distinguished representative of Guatemala for her intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Hungary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'd like to commend you and your team for the way you have carried out your responsibilities during our work of 2 weeks. I also wanted to acknowledge and congratulate you for successfully tackling all procedural issues the PrepCom had to address. Concerning the recommendations to the review conference, we are fully aware of the difficulty of striking a balance when positions of state parties are so far apart. Hungary, as a non-nuclear weapon state, is also of the view that we have to focus on an approach which tackles areas which unite us and not those which divide us. Therefore, we have taken note by a bit of surprise that the revision of the paper containing the recommendations have moved away the middle ground contained in the original version. We have studied carefully the revised version, but like many speakers this morning and yesterday afternoon, Finland, Australia, the Netherlands, Japan, Canada, Norway, and Poland, we had to draw the conclusion that the changes, as opposed to the original version, with a few exceptions where the text really improved, reflects only the position of one group of states. In our view, for a consensual approach, all voices have to be not only listened to, but heard as well. Like Germany, we think that the revised paper doesn't take us closer, but drifts us further apart from a convergence. Therefore, we would like to go back and continue working on the basis of your original paper. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the distinguished representative of Hungary for his intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Spain.
Gracias.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Microphone, please. Thank you. We appreciate your efforts throughout this PrepCom, and we would like to congratulate you on what's been achieved to date, which is quite a lot, and to a large extent has been possible due to your excellent stewardship. With regard to the draft recommendations, we're aware, of course, of the various existing positions on the matter and the extreme difficulty in finding a point of balance. In our view, the first draft was closer to striking that balance and was a good starting point in order to achieve consensus. Unfortunately, we believe that the second draft has moved away from that balance and makes more difficult the idea of bringing about an agreement. From that point of view, Mr. Chairman, we would support, therefore, a return to the text such as what we saw in the first version. Thank you, sir.
I thank the distinguished representative of Spain for his intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Latvia.
Mr. Chair, I am making this intervention on behalf of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Let me thank you for all your efforts to reach a positive and substantive outcome for this preparatory committee. We know that it's not an easy task to accommodate all the various views expressed in the statements and the working papers. However, as we approach the 2020 review conference, seeking common ground is essential. We agree with the delegations, among them Germany and Finland, which yesterday in this room supported the view that the outcome document should reflect a collective vision for 2020 review conference, as well as serve as a useful document for the next year's discussion. We find that the second draft of the recommendation papers moves further away from this aim to create a common ground for the outcome of this session. The next text has introduced elements which fail to represent the range of views in the room. It has lost the necessary balance for the consensus and instead widens the divisions. We agree with the positions expressed by Norway, Poland, and Hungary that the first draft was a good basis for further work and a compromise, and we appeal to return to the previous text. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Latvia for his intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ukraine.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like, are you hearing me? I would like to also thank you and your team for your hard work and in elaborating the PrepCom's recommendations to the 2020 NPT review conference and for distribution of its revised version. The delegation of Ukraine proposed some additional language to paragraph 16, now it is para 20, regarding security assurances. We proposed to stress the importance of respect for existing security assurances already given by the nuclear weapon states to non-nuclear weapon states, in particular the 1994 Memorandum on Security Assurances in connection with Ukraine's accession to the NPT, or 1994 Budapest Memorandum. The state signatories of this memorandum, I'm quoting, reaffirmed their commitment to Ukraine to respect the independence and sovereignty and the existing borders of Ukraine, end unquote, as well as, I'm quoting, reaffirmed their obligation to refrain from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of Ukraine, end unquote. In an era of looming proliferation threats, as well as efforts to quell security concerns of states seeking nuclear deterrent capabilities, the validity of the Budapest Memorandum is especially vital. We express our regret that our proposal is not reflected in the revised draft recommendations, although this issue was raised many times in the course of all three PrepComs, and we suggested a quite generic and balanced language without mentioning the specific nuclear weapon state. In this regard, we would like to underline that by launching and maintaining military aggression against Ukraine and by occupying its territories, the Russian Federation not only violated almost all the provisions of the Budapest Memorandum, but also undermined the credibility of existing and future security assurances, and thus the sustainability of the global nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation regime. In order to foster confidence and security assurances, it is essential to renew full respect for territorial integrity and inviolability of borders of Ukraine by the occupation of its territory by the Russian Federation and full and unconditional withdrawal of all Russian military troops from Ukrainian territory. Having said that, I would like to ask you, Mr. Chairman, to take into account our proposal and to include it to the final version of the draft recommendations. Should it be a consensual draft or a working paper under the chair's own responsibility, as it was the case in the third session of the Preparatory Committee for 2015 review conference of the parties to the Treaty of the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. In particular, we propose to add one sentence at the beginning of para 20 of current revised version of the recommendations. In particular, reaffirm the importance of existing security assurances by nuclear weapon states against the use or threat of use of nuclear weapons against non-nuclear weapon states, in particular the importance of respect for provisions of existing international and regional arrangements in this sphere, including the 1994 Budapest Memorandum. And then, as it is, call for immediate commencement of negotiations and the Conference of Disarmament of effective international legally binding arrangements to assure non-nuclear weapon states against the use or threat of use of nuclear weapons. This proposal was sent to your team. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the distinguished representative of Ukraine for his intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Singapore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My delegation joins previous speakers who have expressed appreciation for your tireless effort in leading our work. We particularly appreciate your attempt to capture the ideas put forward by all delegations. This is not an easy task. Some would say it is impossible. Many delegations who spoke before us said they find the revised draft to lack balance. However, I'm sure we would all acknowledge that balance is in the eye of the beholder. It depends on each of our perspectives. And given the number of states parties here, there are many perspectives. My delegation believes you made an attempt to strike a balance. We believe it is in our collective interest to support you, Mr. Chair, as you guide the work of this preparatory committee. My delegation remains ready to engage on the revised text. We are in your hands in terms of how to proceed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Singapore for his intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Turkey.
First of all, I would like to express our deep appreciation for the hard work you have undertaken so far. We had made our position clear as a group of states on the first version of the draft recommendations. We welcomed its balanced nature, and we made a call for the preservation of that balance. However, we regret to observe that the revised version of the recommendations document has drifted away from that balance. It has taken the comments and views of a certain group of states, parties, at the expense of others in an asymmetrical way. We don't think that this is a realistic approach if we wish to achieve a consensus document. Turkey doesn't find the revised draft as a good basis for a consensus outcome. We hope to see a more constructive and realistic attitude by all parties in the review conference next year, commensurate with the historic nature of that conference. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Turkey for his intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of New Zealand.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. New Zealand remains grateful for the very genuine attempt you and your team have made to arrive at consensus recommendations for forwarding to next year's review conference. New Zealand's view, as we made clear in our comments earlier this week, was that your first draft had not found the right centre of gravity necessary for a document that must reflect the NPT's text and the work done over its lifespan of 49 years. We believe that your new text, although it has included language in a number of paras of some concern to us, does better reflect the views conveyed during the discussion here, as well as the outcomes of previous review conferences, and has more of the necessary balance across the treaty's pillars. So we thank you, Mr. Chair, for you and your team's tireless efforts, and we do hope that you are looking forward to seeing us all again when you chair Main Committee 1 at next year's review conference. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I thank the distinguished representative of New Zealand for her intervention. I surely will be there, inshallah. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Peru.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, sir. I would like to extend to you and your team my delegation's recognition for the excellent work, especially on thorny issues where it was difficult to achieve a consensus text. Mr. Chairman, when the first draft was circulated, we thought it was an excellent document which just needed a few small adjustments. Throughout these 2 weeks of very transparent and constructive discussions, we've been able to hear the various positions of states, which, thanks to you, were then reflected in the second draft of the recommendations, which my delegation appreciates. We're especially pleased to see a paragraph that was strengthened on the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons, as well as on the treaty on prohibiting nuclear weapons and its complement to the NPT. And we thus support the second draft you submitted, and we believe that it reflects the proposals of various delegations. To conclude, the Peruvian team is prepared to continue working in order to achieve a consensus-based document. Thank you, sir.
I thank the distinguished representative of Peru for his intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Italy.
Mr. Chair, at the outset, I would like to congratulate you for the way you steered our work during the past 2 weeks. And thank you for your hard and your team's efforts in trying to achieve a substantive consensus outcome. We realize that your task was difficult and appreciate your attempt to strike a balance among different views. We concur with other delegations that overall such a balance was achieved in the first draft of the recommendations. It was a compromise, and as such, it could not satisfy all delegations' demands to the fullest. However, it was a compromise that would have been acceptable for us, as for many others. Despite improvements in some sections, we feel that this revised version brings us further away from that balance. We therefore join others in encouraging you to revert to the previous text in a further attempt to reach consensus or as a basis for a working paper. At a difficult time such as the current one, it is fundamental to focus on elements that unite us rather than on those dividing us. This will be one of the essential conditions for a successful review conference and for the preservation and strengthening of the NPT, to which Italy remains firmly and fully committed. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Italy for his intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Portugal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to commend you for your hard work. Yours is definitely not an easy task. On the draft recommendations, as many others already pointed out, I would like to underline our strong preference for your first draft, which is, in our opinion, a much more balanced text. Although we recognize some improvements in certain areas, such as risk reduction or gender perspectives, overall, we consider that this revised version of the recommendations is moving us further away from a compromise. We were expecting only some minor consensual changes in the text, but at the end, this was not the case. Mr. Chairman, my delegation is flexible and constructive. Our goal is to build trust and prepare the way for a successful 2020 review conference. In that spirit, we are convinced that your previous draft has a better chance to promote consensus and enhance dialogue among state parties. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the distinguished representative of Portugal for his intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Jamaica.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning to you and to colleagues. My delegation is taking the floor to make a very brief intervention to thank you and your team for the work that you have done and to acknowledge your hard efforts through the presentation of the revised document that we have before us for consideration. Please be assured of Jamaica's full support and willingness to continue our dialogue on the basis of your revised text, Mr. Chair. We recognize that your responsibility is a difficult one in terms of trying to respond to the many demands that are being made, at times very varied demands, but we are fully appreciative of the effort that you have made in giving us the document that we have presently. So please be assured of Jamaica's full support and willingness to continue dialogue on the basis of the revised paper. And we look forward to whatever you would make a determination for the best approach going forward, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Jamaica for her intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Kazakhstan.
Mr. Chair, my delegation joins others in thanking you for capable chairmanship and diligent work done for this process. For us, the second version of the draft recommendations is more preferable than the first one. We consider the various proposals and ideas expressed in it to be more helpful to the negotiation process of the review conference. This is not yet the final document of the conference, so at this stage, it would be better to show more flexibility and a constructive attitude. We should complete the third session with some positive results, which in turn will provide a positive impetus during the next year's negotiations. Of course, the latest text is not ideal, and nor were the proposals of Kazakhstan fully taken into consideration. For example, in Para 24, we suggested formulations reflecting the importance of strengthening the interaction between the nuclear weapon-free zones, as well as consolidating their efforts towards creating a new zones so as to aim for a nuclear weapon-free world. Strengthening the capacity and role of such zones with a view to promote nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation is not only very important, but also relevant and necessary. But in order to maintain a constructive spirit in our common work, we are ready to accept this point as it is. Mr. Chair, we see in the text a new addition, namely Para 67, which refers to the importance of promoting the International Day, 26th of September. We fully support this para and the initiative itself. At the same time, we would like to suggest adding another equally important international day. It is the 29th of August, the International Day Against Nuclear Tests. In the context of not yet achieved complete ban on nuclear tests, we consider such a proposal quite reasonable and relevant. The objectives of these two important days are interconnected and mutually reinforcing approach to reach global zero. Our proposal doesn't require major changes and would just read as follows: to promote 29th August and 26th of September, the International Days Against Nuclear Tests and for the total elimination of nuclear weapons, in order to, and the rest of the sentence remains unchanged. Mr. Chairman, to conclude, I reaffirm that my delegation will continue its constructive approach and looks forward to a successful conclusion of this session. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Kazakhstan for his intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of China.
Mr. Chair, China carefully studied the revised draft you circulated. We have also noted totally different reactions by state parties. Frankly speaking, many revision proposals put forward by China were not adopted. For example, a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. For example, countries with the largest nuclear arsenals should bear primary and special responsibilities in nuclear disarmament. And supporting the P5 in enhancing exchanges in nuclear policy and nuclear strategy. Calling on nuclear weapon states to undertake non-first use of nuclear weapons and conclude international legal instruments to that end. And solve the nuclear non-proliferation issue through political and diplomatic means, etc. All of these proposals reflect broad consensus of the international community. We regret that they are not included in the revised draft by the chair. At the same time, some of the content in the new draft present difficulties to China, including formulations regarding Korean Peninsula nuclear issue. On the other hand, we understand the situation that the chair is facing. With completely different positions and demands, it is always a big challenge to reach consensus within a short period of time. What I want to stress is that Notwithstanding our dissatisfaction with the revised draft, through this session, we have felt the strong political will of the majority of the state parties to uphold multilateralism and the treaty regime and to achieve outcomes in the next year's review conference. China is encouraged by this. My distinguished colleague from Russian delegation, in his statement yesterday morning, called on us to view positively the role of NPT from a historical perspective. I totally agree with him. In the year to come, China will continue to advocate our proposals, cooperate closely with parties, including with Chair-designate Grossi and Mr. Chair, maintain positive communications with parties to jointly play a constructive role in working towards outcome in the review conference next year. In conclusion, like the previous delegations, I would like to once again thank Chair and his team, as well as the Secretariat, for their hard work. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of China for his intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Romania.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to join other delegation in expressing our disappointment with the second draft of recommendations. However, Mr. Chair, I believe you could still find some common ground. The recipe, Mr. Chair, is to look at the most diverse group in this room. Yesterday, Mr. Chair, as you know, was Europe's Day. It is a day when all nations of Europe celebrate the unity in diversity of our community. As you know, Mr. Chair, the EU, and I believe so, is the most diverse group in this room. We have member states that are nuclear weapon states. We have member states that are non-nuclear weapon states. We have states belonging to a collective defense organization and also neutral states. So, Mr. Chair, in comparison with other group of states that expressed joint statements during this session, I firmly believe that it is the EU where you should look at in achieving consensus-based approaches. If you look at EU common statements, you could find common agreed language on the most sensitive issues of the NPT community. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, my delegation strongly advises you to look at EU as a good example for consensus-based approaches. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Romania for his intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Sweden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We thank and commend you for the work put into the recommendations. Striking a balance acceptable to all states is challenging, to say the least, a delicate task. Without further commenting on the substance, which we have done in our earlier interventions, it also seems to us that with the revised version of the recommendations, we have moved further away from the consensus that we need, and this is unfortunate. As was expressed by the delegation of the Netherlands, it is wise to remember that decisions in the NPT are made by consensus. And this is a lesson we all need to reflect on ahead of next year's review conference. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Sweden for her intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Luxembourg.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair.
First, let me join others in commending you for your hard work throughout this PrepCom and on the draft recommendations before us. While we appreciate the difficulty of reconciling different positions in this room, Luxembourg would like to join countries like Germany, Finland, the Netherlands, Japan, and many others by saying that the second version of these recommendations regrettably move us further away from consensus. Luxembourg would therefore like to express its strong preference for the first version of the text to be used as a basis for any possible outcome document. While it was certainly not perfect, the first version was more balanced and constituted a good basis for possible consensus. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Luxembourg for his intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Nigeria.
Mr. Chair, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the African Group. The group once again applauds the exemplary manner you have led the work of this session. We take this opportunity to fully support the rightly guided course you have taken with the version of this paper. The African Group commends your bravery and transparency in reflecting the true state of affairs. The group believes this revised paper is a marked progress from the previous one, and we stand ready to work further to improve it. In the meantime, please be assured of our continuous support. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Nigeria for her intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would like to join other delegates in thanking you and your team for commendable efforts in providing us with the revised version of the recommendations. It has been significantly improved. That is why, in line with many states who supported the draft, we fully support it. In line with 120 member states of the non-aligned movement, we also believe that it is a good basis to guide our deliberations in the 2020 review conference. We thank you again and looking forward to cooperating with you in the 2020 review conference. We count on your able leadership in successfully steering our deliberation on nuclear disarmament in Main Committee 1. Thank you again.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran for his intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Bulgaria.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me begin by thanking you and your team for all your efforts and hard work. I'll be brief. I joined those delegations that expressed the view that the second draft brings us further from consensus. We would have been happy to continue working on the first one. And I just wanted to ask everyone to make sure that for NPT, we need everyone on board, so numbers don't really matter. All of us are here to get a consensus outcome and to preserve and continue and strengthen the norm. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Bulgaria for her intervention. I will now give the floor to the distinguished representative of South Africa.
Thank you, Mr. President. We too, in the continent, see ourselves as an example of unity in diversity, albeit a bigger number of countries, but then again, we're not competing about numbers. We'd like to join Nigeria in the statement made on behalf of the Africa Group, expressing our readiness to work on what you have tabled in Rev 1. Our understanding is that there is no prior document except the document that we are discussing. There is Rev 1, on the assumption that a discussion took place that culminated or produced Rev 1. So it's difficult for us to understand on what basis you would bring back a document that has been superseded by discussions. So we see our task this morning as either trying to enrich the document, which we should, where we feel that it's deficient, or expressing perhaps satisfaction with it. Many delegations have pointed out areas where they would like to have it strengthened. We also have areas where we would like to have it strengthened. So, Mr. Chair, we're ready to work with you on what we have before us, which is Rev 1. There is no other document but Rev 1, which has superseded the prior document, unless our understanding of the rules of procedure is different in terms of the management of conferences. I thank you, Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of South Africa for her intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I would like to join other delegation in commending you for your hard work. We all know how divisive these issues are. Your task to accommodate different views in one document must have been very challenging. So I thank you for your hard work. My delegation still believes that your first draft had captured a good balance between all three pillars, and the draft provided an excellent basis for our joint deliberation. We welcome some of the improvements made in the second draft. For instance, the paragraph on the DPRK and on the risk reduction and transparency. However, some of the new amendments incorporated to this new draft are very difficult for my delegation to support. Despite the different views on specific issues, my delegation believes that we still have a common ground to work on. No one can deny the values and benefits of the NPT as both the cornerstone of the non-proliferation regime and an essential part of the international security architecture. Economic benefits and opportunities provided by the peaceful uses of nuclear energy under the NPT is for all of us to share. This is the reason why we should work together to maintain and further strengthen the NPT regime. I would like to record that the NPT came to the world thanks to mutual concession and art of compromise. The indefinite extension of the treaty in 1995 was also another success based on a fine balance of concession. In this line, the Republic of Korea reaffirms its commitment to engage in the discussions in a constructive, flexible, and forward-looking manner. My delegation stands ready to work with you, Mr. Chairman, to lead our deliberation to a successful conclusion, and we look forward to continuing our joint work towards a successful 2020 NPT review conference. I thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Republic of Korea for his intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Iraq.
شكرا جزيلا السيد الرئيس.
Thank you very much, Chair. At the outset, we wish to welcome the efforts that you have undertaken as you have led our committee, in addition to the drawing up of these recommendations and how you have managed differences of views. These two documents are not ideal and have not met all of the concerns, but we do appreciate the difficulty of this task you have before you to achieve consensus, particularly given these divergences of views. We are a non-nuclear weapons state, and we wish to achieve a common goal to have some common ground to bring us closer to the objectives of the treaty, and this in line with the three pillars of the treaty. We find that the second version is balanced and can be a basis for the review conference in 2020. We must demonstrate political will and flexibility so we can achieve consensus. We support your efforts indeed as regards the revised version. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Iraq for his intervention. I don't see any other speakers wishing to take the floor. Okay. Distinguished delegates, after listening to the many delegations that took the floor both last night and this morning, it is my understanding that the revised version of the draft recommendations contained in document NPT/Conf 2020/PC3/CRP4 Ref 1 does not command consensus. I have therefore decided to issue the document as a chairman's working paper entitled Recommendations by the Chair to the 2020 NPT Review Conference. The working paper is submitted under the Chair's own responsibility without prejudice to the position of any delegation or to the final outcome of the 2020 Review Conference. It will be made available shortly on PaperSmart, symbol npt/conf 2020/pc3/wp49. Distinguished delegates, I would also like to inform that I have also prepared a chairman's reflection on the state of the NPT, which will be issued as a conference document under the sole responsibility of the chair. It will be available shortly on the PaperSmart portal, symbol npt/conf 2020/pc3/14. This reflections paper builds on the practice initiated by the chairs of the first two sessions of the Preparatory Committee. It contains my own personal views on the current situation related to the treaty's implementation and its conditions, particularly in the context of the particular mandate of the third session of the Preparatory Committee. And in light that we will now move out of the formal PrepCon phase into the pre-RefCon phase, it is my hope that this reflection paper will assist us in our considerations moving forward. We will now move to agenda item 11, regarding any other matters. Is there any delegation wishing to take the floor on this agenda item? I recognize the distinguished representative of France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to make a statement that has been endorsed by the 70 following states: Albania, Germany, Andorra, Saudi Arabia, Australia, Austria, Bahrain, Belgium, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Brazil, Bulgaria, Canada, Cyprus, Colombia, Croatia, Denmark, El Salvador, the United Arab Emirates, Spain, Estonia, the United States of America, Finland, Georgia, Greece, Honduras, Hungary, Ireland, Iceland, Italy, Iraq, Japan, Jordan, Kuwait, Liechtenstein, Lithuania, Latvia, Luxembourg, North Macedonia, Malaysia, Malta, Morocco, Mexico, Monaco, Montenegro, Niger, Nigeria, Norway, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, the Netherlands, Paraguay, Peru, Poland, Portugal, Qatar, the Republic of Korea, the Republic of Moldova, Republic, Romania, the United Kingdom of Great Britain, Northern Ireland, San Marino, Serbia, Singapore, Slovakia, Slovenia, Switzerland, Turkey, Ukraine, and my country, France. We, the states parties to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, strongly deplore the grave and undiminished threat to regional and international peace and security posed by ongoing nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles programs that the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, DPRK, has developed and is continuing with in violation of relevant United Nations Security Council resolutions. We welcome the two summits held between the United States and the DPRK, as well as the 3 inter-Korean summits in 2018, which helped to reduce tensions and re-establish dialogue. We also welcome the DPRK's reaffirmed commitment to complete denuclearization. However, the steps that have been taken by the DPRK fall short. We encourage the DPRK to avoid any sort of provocation. We also call for the DPRK to continue discussions with the United States on denuclearization. We urge DPRK to turn its words into actions and to take concrete steps towards abandoning all of its nuclear weapons, ballistic missiles and related programs in a complete, verifiable and irreversible manner, and immediately cease all related activities in accordance with all relevant UN Security Council resolutions. Only by enacting these concrete steps will we ensure that regional and international peace and security are preserved. This will also preserve the international non-proliferation regime, of which the NPT remains the cornerstone. We remain determined to strengthen both the non-proliferation regime and the NPT. We reaffirm that the DPRK cannot and will never have the status of a nuclear weapons state pursuant to the NPT, as stated in Security Council Resolutions 1718 from 2006 and 1874 from 2009, and in the final document of the 2010 Review Conference of the Parties to the NPT. We continue to urge the DPRK to fully comply with all its obligations under all relevant Security Council resolutions, and also to return swiftly to the NPT and IAEA safeguards. We reaffirm that we will faithfully and scrupulously implement the relevant UN Security Council resolutions, and we call on all member states to fully enforce all UN Security Council sanctions. To this end, we commit to further strengthening international cooperation. Chair, finally, we wish that this statement be annexed to the final document. I thank you very much for your attention, Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of France for his statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have the privilege of delivering a joint statement on behalf of 52 NPT parties on the important issue of Syrian noncompliance with the treaty. In addition to my delegation, the following countries align themselves with this statement: Albania, Andorra, Australia, Austria, Belgium, Bulgaria, Brazil, Canada, Colombia, Croatia, Cyprus, Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Georgia, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Iceland, Ireland, Italy, Japan, Latvia, Liechtenstein, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Malawi, Malta, Monaco, Montenegro, Netherlands, New Zealand, North Macedonia, Norway, Panama, Peru, Poland, Portugal, the Republic of Korea, Romania, San Marino, Slovakia, Slovenia, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, Turkey, Ukraine, and the United Kingdom. We, as parties to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, express deep concern with the Syrian Arab Republic's continued non-compliance with its IAEA Safeguards Agreement under the NPT in connection with its construction of an undeclared nuclear reactor at Dar al-Zur. We note that nearly 8 years have passed since the IAEA Board of Governors found, based on the IAEA's technical assessment of the facility, that Syria's failure to declare the Dar al-Zur reactor constituted non-compliance with Syria's obligations under its IAEA Safeguards Agreement. We further note, with continued concern, the IAEA Director General's finding that the Dar al-Zur reactor had features comparable to the gas-cooled graphite-moderated reactor at Yongbyon in the DPRK. We deeply regret that Syria has failed to respond to the IAEA Director General's calls for it to cooperate with the IAEA in connection with unresolved issues arising from its non-compliance. We note with concern the IAEA Director General's confirmation that Syria has not engaged substantively with the IAEA regarding the nature of the site or other related locations since June 2008. We stress that Syria's IAEA safeguards noncompliance remains a serious concern and constitutes noncompliance with Article 3 of the NPT. We emphasize that full compliance with obligations under the treaty is at the heart of the shared security benefits enjoyed by all NPT parties, and that addressing instances of noncompliance is essential to upholding the treaty's integrity and maintaining the credibility of the IAEA safeguard system. Compliance with non-proliferation obligations is also a critical component of efforts to advance regional security and arms control. We echo the call of the IAEA Director General and Board of Governors for Syria to cooperate with the IAEA fully and without further delay in connection with all unresolved issues related to the Dar al-Zur site and all related locations, and to provide the IAEA with access to all information, sites, material, and persons necessary for the IAEA to resolve all outstanding questions so that the IAEA can provide the necessary assurances as to the exclusively peaceful nature of Syria's nuclear program. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the distinguished representative of the United States for his statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of China.
Mr. Chair, on the nuclear issue of the Korean Peninsula, early realization of denuclearization of the peninsula and the lasting peace on the peninsula is the common expectation of the international community and is the interest of all parties. Currently, the question of the Korean Peninsula is at a critical juncture of political settlement. We hope that the parties concerned will cherish the hard-won dialogue and ease of tension, work towards each other, and work together to positively work for the denuclearization and political settlement of the question of the Korean Peninsula. States parties of the NPT should play a constructive role in this regard. Our discussion should be conducive to the relevant diplomatic efforts and help ease the tension and promote the continuation of dialogue instead of to the contrary. China always believes that our meeting is not the appropriate forum for the settlement of the Korean Peninsula issue. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of China for his statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation.
Спасибо.
Thank you very much, Chair. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, first and foremost, Chair, we wish to thank you for an excellent job, a very complex job that you've done on a comprehensive fulfillment and dynamic level of coordination of our discussions at this third session of the PrepCom. The debates that were held all give us further food for thought. But the main conclusion is that no one here in our forum is disputing or has disputed the viability of the NPT as one of the foundations of the modern and contemporary system of international security. And our unique treaty that we share continues to harmoniously bring together the solutions to issues of non-proliferation, nuclear disarmament, and the equal cooperation in the field of using atoms for peaceful purposes. The NPT has always been and will remain an example of the effectiveness of multilateral diplomacy and a shining example of positive cooperation between states parties in addressing global international questions. We must not forget that nothing else, we don't have anything else, no alternative. Chair, we value the efforts that you have undertaken to prepare these recommendations. Regrettably, the accumulative differences of view have not allowed us to achieve a consensus-based approval. However, we would like to believe that the general constructive tone that has been set for further discussions during the review conference itself has already, this tone has been set. The Russian priorities are set out in detail in our statements and also in our working document that we submit. We very much hope that our constructive calls will receive due feedback and be received positively from states parties. And certainly, of course, we wish Mr. Ambassador Grossi and you, Chair, who has a very difficult task, we wish you patience and strength for this very difficult task that you have to successfully carry out this review conference next year. We will assist you in all ways in your endeavours. Chair, at this session, we had comprehensive discussions on increasing the effectiveness of the review process. Many creative ideas were put forward. In this context, I would like to once again draw particular attention of the room to the most pressing acute organizational problem, which requires a solution, and immediately so. I'd like to highlight particularly that we are not disputing the right of any state to promote their national approaches, even if they run counter to the interests of strengthening our treaties regime. Therefore, we were surprised. But we were very patient to hear from representatives of some states who continue to openly undermine the decisions of such an important, for the usual functioning of the NPT's problems, as, for example, ensuring the CTBT enter into force, convening a conference on creating a zone free from nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East, and the consistent implementation of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action on the Iranian nuclear program. We must bear in mind the odious position of some NATO countries who, for some reason, still believe that now, here in the 21st century, preparing to use nuclear weapons involving non-nuclear weapon states in the process can in some way be under the NPT regime. So let's leave these provocational approach for further detailed discussion at the upcoming review conference. I would say once again, we are not disputing the right of every state to defend the approaches that they believe to be part of their national policy. We largely welcome, to a certain extent, the situation when every representative of a so-called Western democracy lift their masks and show their real face. It is a very different case when one of the countries goes to such a depth as to violate and seriously so their obligations before nations. And their activities seem to interfere in the creation of national delegations of other states. It's unlikely that the founding fathers of the UN could imagine that this spirit and letter of the charter that they wrote, the UN charter that they wrote, would be so cynically and used and instrumentalized by the country that was entrusted with the honor of hosting the headquarters. Here we're talking about a violation by Washington of their fundamental organizational law to ensure the issuance of visas for all representatives of official delegations from member states of the UN who are coming to New York for official meetings. As a result of this unlawful activity on the part of the United States, several official representatives of Russia were not able to participate in our forum. From the point of view of multilateral diplomacy, this is absurd and is absolutely unacceptable situation. Washington, in the most flagrant fashion, is violating its obligations under the agreement from 1947 pertaining to the UN headquarters, which clearly and unambiguously requires the US to ensure unhindered travel to the UN for representatives or other representatives of UN member states. And also that includes issuing visas free of charge and as soon as possible. The US has no right to block the rights of representatives of other states to attend UN activities, nor can they decide for them who should be part of national delegations and who shouldn't. This destructive activities, in doing so, the US is undermining the UN Charter and is directly discrediting the Secretary General and the Secretariat of the UN, who are obliged to ensure a timely solution to all organizational issues for the normal functioning of the United Nations, in whatever country a specific activity or event is taking place. The Russian Federation, it would urge the United States to fulfill, and completely so, America's obligations to ensure unhindered access or travel for Russia representatives to all activities or events of the UN that are held on United States soil. And this call is fully in line with the previous, this also pertains to the upcoming 2020 review conference on the NPT. Bearing in mind the fact that multi-entry visas for UN are given for a year, we have again in advance fulfilled all the formalities for this. So if by the end of this year, all members of the Russian delegation to the review conference of the NPT planned for 2020 do not have US visas, the UN Secretariat will have to bring this issue to the whole organizing of the review conference, probably in Geneva, to Vienna, or to the capital of any other state who is able to, in a responsible approach, demonstrate a responsible approach and fulfill their organizational and technological obligations before the United Nations. Looking at the UN Secretariat, and we will turn directly to the UN Secretary General with a request to now immediately take this question under his personal and most strict control so that we can prevent the US from committing another unlawful act towards official representatives of UN member states. Certainly, we all love New York. But here, we are not asking to be invited by the US as a guest. We also want to here appreciate this city and benefit from its energy and dynamic pace of life. Here, we are here to carry out a responsible and serious job, to seek joint common solutions to the most pressing issues of international security. And as regards the US obligations and those of the UN Secretariat, here they must address all of the organizational issues. That is their duty. If the UN Secretariat is not able to do this on US territory, then we need to find somewhere else, a better place to hold such an important forum. For example, the sessions of the Disarmament Commission, the first committee, the UN's first committee, and certainly, of course, the review conference of the NPT. We would request the Secretariat to, in due fashion, reflect our communication and immediately undertake all the necessary organizational steps. I thank you very much, Chair, and I thank all of you for your attention. And we'll see you at the next successful meeting. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation for his statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
Mr. Chair, actually, we were astounded at the surreal statement that was delivered by the representative of the United States on behalf of a number of countries. And in this regard, I would like to make the following remarks. First, the conclusion that the Secretariat has tabled to the Board of Governors in June 2011, actually, it was not built on any conclusive evidence. It was only built on hypotheses that were taken from open sources that have been fabricated by very well-known intelligence services. Also, such conclusion, actually, it was formulated as a likely probability. This undecisive charging word, which is totally unacceptable, and it does not run harmonious to the methods of work at the IAEA, which requires full verification beyond any shadow of doubt. The Board of Governors also has not adopted this conclusion by consensus, but by vote, due to the objection by a large number of member states to the same. Second, the claims and allegations leveled against my country turns a blind eye to what was mentioned by Mohammed al-Baradei, the ex-general director of the IAEA, as he said that failing to provide the IAEA in a timely manner with the information related to the destroyed building in Deir ez-Zor has seriously obstructed the agency from carrying out its responsibility as per the NPT and the Safeguards Agreement due to the use of unilateral force. End of quote. And this is a very important and serious matter that has been reiterated by al-Baradei in his memoirs, especially in pages 228, 229, and 230, contained in the book entitled The Age of Deception, Nuclear Diplomacy in Treacherous Times. Third, Syria has cooperated positively and constructively with the agency relating to the nature of the site of Deir ez-Zor, which was attacked by the Israeli Air Force from Turkey, and my country has allowed the inspectors of the IAEA to visit the site in June 2008 and to take samples and environmental samples therefrom, and we answered all the inquiries and questions that have been addressed to us. Actually, Syria was highly serious and flexible in relation to solving all the pending issues, and we communicated with the IAEA in October 2011 in what was called the Plan of Action, which included resolving all these issues. However, Mr. Chair, it's very unfortunate that certain countries, especially the United States, have pressured the IAEA in order not to implement this action or this plan of action to serve some ulterior political motives that have been uncovered by WikiLeaks. And thus, the United States is responsible for the failure to implement this plan and not Syria. Fourth, the annual reports of the agency regarding the safeguards thereof, the last of which, or the most recent of which, is 2018, the nuclear materials that have been announced are within the peaceful activities, and Syria has always been current with its legal obligations regarding the safeguards and the NPT. Fifth, the unethical coverage that is provided by the subsequent U.S. administrations to Israel is a very flagrant evidence of the irresponsible policies of these administrations that have only brought destruction, instability, compromising and of peace and stability in our region. And a very flagrant evidence of this is the invasion of Iraq, the destruction of Libya, and the mobilization of terrorists to our country, to my country, and also their conspiracy against the Palestinian cause. Unfortunately, the Security Council and the IAEA have failed to condemn the Israeli flagrant attack on my country in 2007. Neither did they condemn the refusal by Israel to cooperate with the IAEA. Sixth, the acknowledgement, the official acknowledgement by Israel of its responsibility to the aggression on Deir ez-Zor requires that Israel accepts to cooperate with the IAEA to uncover the truth about the pollution that was caused by its aggression, and thus to solve the puzzle of some of the uranium or of human uranium in this place. Therefore, any discussion will fail unless Israel, the aggressive force, cooperates with the IAEA. Mr. Chair, next year we will celebrate the 50th anniversary of the entry of the NPT into force, and it is totally unacceptable that flagrant violations to this treaty continue without any response. Thus, we do require that the U.S. should be held accountable for its non-compliance with the NPT, especially Article 1. As well as the non-compliance by the five countries, Germany, Italy, Belgium, and Turkey, and the Netherlands, on whose territories U.S. nuclear weapons are mounted in contradiction to Article 2 of the treaty. And we do require the countries in whose territories these weapons exist to address the flagrant violation of the NPT. Mr. Chair, the statement that has just been delivered by the United States regarding my country actually is an expression of the peak of hypocrisy and hubris, as most of these countries on behalf of which the USA spoke, actually they are in non-compliance with the treaty, maybe in different degrees. Some of these countries receive US nuclear weapons, whether on their territories or in their territorial waters. And this goes without saying, this is non-compliance with Article 2 of the treaty. Some of these countries also cooperate with Israel in the military nuclear realm, which also runs counter to their obligations by the treaty and all the conclusions of the previous review conferences. Among these countries, There are some who cooperate with and provide Israel with delivery regimes or delivery systems of nuclear weapons, including the German Dolphin submarines. We are actually not just making allegations, because the United States is the most non-complying party of the NPT, as it's spreading nuclear weapons outside or without its territories, and it is also cooperating with Israel on nuclear issues, and it is just also covers up for Israel. And this is a flagrant non-compliance beyond any shadow of doubt, and that the upcoming conference should address this state of non-compliance with all resolve and seriousness. We do reiterate that the United States is conspiring against my country with other parties. Therefore, there is no credibility whatsoever to the allegations of the United States against my country. And if the United States is right, and if it is really true regarding its keenness on the NPT, it could have by now forced Israel to comply with the NPT and to place its facilities under the inspection of the IAEA, and it wouldn't have even objected to our initiative to establish a nuclear-free zone in the Middle East. And finally, Mr. Chair, please consider this statement as part of the minutes and the official documents of the third session of the Preparatory Committee. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Syrian Arab Republic for his statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to say a few words about the remarks made by the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation. Russia, unfortunately, continues to make ridiculous charges that the U.S. and other NATO states are in violation of the NPT through the so-called nuclear sharing arrangements. Russia's knowledge of the negotiating history of the NPT is quite extensive. They know well that these arrangements were taken into account during the negotiations of the treaty. So my advice would be to my Russian colleague, because countries in this room have heard this ridiculous charge over and over and over again. My advice simply would be to end this charade, get over it, and move on. With regard to this issue about the visa, the NPT PrepCom is not the proper forum to raise these issues. Rather, the appropriate forum, as Russia very well knows, is the United Nations Host Country Committee. Let me just be very clear. The U.S. takes its obligations as host country to the UN headquarters very seriously, issuing visas to thousands of individuals each year to serve at the UN and take part in UN-sponsored events. As the Russian Federation also well knows, each visa application is adjudicated in accordance with U.S. laws and the UN headquarters agreement and subjected to detailed review. Exact processing times may vary depending on the particular facts and circumstances of each individual visa application. So again, I would refer my Russian colleague to the host country committee to further discuss this issue. And just to turn very briefly, Mr. Chairman, I apologize for taking the floor for this period of time. As we all know, Syria and its patrons have repeatedly questioned the factual basis for the IAEA's technical findings regarding the Dar al-Zur reactor, repeatedly accusing the U.S. of fabricating evidence in order to mislead the IAEA and malign the Assad regime. These claims are without a doubt politically motivated and ignore the broad spectrum of factual information upon which the agency based its findings, including on-site verification and environmental sampling, commercial satellite and radar imagery, and procurement information. For those of you interested in further detail, I would refer you to the Director General's May 2011 report on Syria, which is publicly posted on the IAEA's website and provides an extensive overview of the factual basis for the IAEA's assessment that the facility at Dar al-Zur was very likely a nuclear reactor that should have been declared by Syria. The Director General has repeatedly confirmed that no new evidence has been provided to the IAEA that would call into question the IAEA's assessment. We have full confidence in the IAEA to draw sound and independent technical conclusions based on all the information available to it. We wish other states would adopt a similar approach, rather than propounding substantiated claims that contradict the independent technical assessments of the agency. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the distinguished representative of the United States for his statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Brazil.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. In name of the NAC, I express our admiration of and full support to the work you have carried out as chair of this PrepCom. And the same goes for your competent team and to the secretary and supporting members of the Secretariat. We would have preferred a consensus set of recommendations, and we believe that we work towards this end in the most constructive manner for the 2020 RevCom. However, it is the NAC's assessment that today we take a big step in the right direction, thanks to a generally constructive tone that prevailed throughout the meeting, the wealth of contributions and overall engagement of groups and states individually. But most of all, we owe that step taken to your fair and balanced conduct of work, to your capacity to listen and respond to positions actually being put forth in statements and in writing, and sorting these out in a way that brings us closer to the body of obligations and commitments we have all undertaken during the course of the NPT's almost 50 years of existence. And we owe it to yours and colleagues' respect for the point of view most likely to attract the support of the majority of NPT states parties, if not consensus. The NAC is confident that thanks to your good work and to the high standards set by Malaysia, we will be better positioned to achieve a successful outcome in 2020. We will continue to support Ambassador Grossi in the same constructive manner and wish him and the chairs of committees for 2020 every success in their endeavors. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Brazil for his statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation.
Спасибо.
Thank you very much, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, unfortunately, once again, I must take the floor to respond to some of the ideas put forward by the distinguished representative of the United States. I'd like to note that in my previous statement, it was the United States was speaking about the substance of our discussion here. At the MPT, there was no question, no accusations made here. I just simply highlighted that the United States has every right to, here at the UN, tell us about their national position. Unfortunately, the national position of the United States is that they refuse to ratify the CTBT, even though it was the United States themselves who were the initiator of this agreement. And at the time, they set it out as, at the time they said it was priority number one of the Obama administration. The second position of the United States is that they refused and withdrew from the JCPOA on the Iranian nuclear program, while it was the United States themselves who were the initiator of this vitally important agreement, as enshrined by Security Council resolutions. The United States have always been undermining the convening of a conference on creating a zone free from weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East, although they are a co-sponsor of the decision on this issue from the resolution from 1995 on this very issue. The United States still, for some reason, believe that preparing for carrying out a nuclear strike alongside non-nuclear states of NATO strengthens the NPT. This is the position of the United States. And I am more than certain that the absolute majority of states present here do not agree with this position. But again, once again, I would highlight in my statement, I in no way raised this discussion again. In my statement, I simply wanted to note, and particularly that the complete collapse of the US diplomacy, it shows that rather than carrying out dialogue, they actually are going to such depths as to sinking to such depths as to not issue a visa for a UN event that has been held here in New York. So they don't have any argument to defend their position. All they say is they're using absolutely unacceptable under the methods under the UN Charter. And the UN Secretariat needs to pay particular attention to this issue. And the United States will not be able to use some committee that meets every 6 months and has not solved this problem, is not solving this issue. The United States are undermining UN activities and events, not only with their unacceptable position on the fundamental substantive issues, but on simply from a purely organizational point of view. And it is high time for us to put an end to this. We need to solve this problem. The United States does not have, and never will have the right to dictate the position impose their position onto other UN member states, nor on the UN Secretariat. Can't tell them how to solve organizational issues. Therefore, let's focus on some positive, unifying topics. And these organizational issues will be down to the Secretariat of the UN to solve. If the United States is not able to fulfill its obligations before the United Nations, then the UN Secretariat needs to simply find another platform for holding our conference, which should bring us all together and not divide us. Therefore, let's be serious about this, and let's not hide behind some committee which isn't solving this problem. And the NPT review conference must be held with great sense of responsibility and seriousness, and we should be able to give opportunity to all delegations to discuss the most pressing issues in the NPT context. And the most important problems are indeed the positions on the topics that I also, inter alia, set forth. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation for his intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will try to be brief. Regarding the comments by the U.S. representative, I would like to indicate the following. Mr. Chairman, the regime in the United States is trying to distort the facts as usual and trying to target and fabricate accusations against some states in order to divert attention from the violations and non-compliance of the U.S. To the NPT, and to divert attention also from the nuclear weapons in Israel, and to prevent the establishment of a nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East. Mr. Chairman, if there was any if there was approval of the conclusions that the Secretariat has reached in the IAEA, there would not have been a voting and an objection by several states against that conclusion. They attempted to manipulate the facts. Using terminology that does not indicate certainty, but only used the term likely in the conclusion. If this proves anything, Mr. Chairman, it proves the fabrication that the U.S. Stood behind, of course, in order to protect, as indicated earlier, the non-accession of Israel to the NPT. Mr. Chairman, the U.S. representative tried to evade the violations of his state and their non-compliance by referring to what he called understandings. Mr. Chairman, the treaty, the NPT, is clear and explicit. Article 1 provides for the following, and I will read it to all so that they can understand that the treaty is clear and does not refer to any understandings, and it states,
تتعهد كل من الدول الحائزة للأسلحة النووية
all nuclear weapon states party to this treaty guarantee to not transfer to any recipient any nuclear weapon or other nuclear explosive devices or any direct control or indirect control over weapons or devices of this type, and that they will not provide any assistance to any non-nuclear weapon state in order to manufacture nuclear weapons or other nuclear explosive devices, or to acquire them or gain control over such weapons in any other way. End of Article 1. I pose the question here. What are the number of non-compliance cases of the US based on this Article 1 alone? In every part of this article, the US presents a case of non-compliance. It is not possible and not acceptable that the NPT remains and that we celebrate its 50th anniversary without addressing these non-compliance cases. Chairman, it's as if I were envisioning our next review in 2020. And the U.S.'s preparation and some other states to sabotage the conference by following a policy that implies to everyone that they will work to make the conference a failure, as they have done in 2015. And I will end here, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Syrian Arab Republic for his statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Sweden.
Mr. Chair, I would like to take this opportunity to make a few closing remarks. Sweden commends the efforts made by you and your team. We thank you for the hard work and leadership throughout this preparatory committee. Getting our house in order by resolving the procedural issues, including the president designate for the review conference, was an important step, not least considering that we in substance will have bigger fish to fry. Although there are diverging views among state parties, we have appreciated the constructive atmosphere in which this PrepCom has been conducted. As we have said earlier, for us, reaching consensus and being true to the treaty is the overarching priority. Let us look forward towards next year. We must keep striving for common ground and find a way to overcome the differences currently prevailing. Mr. Chair, the future of the NPT cannot be taken for granted. The commitments of 1995, 2000, 2010 must be preserved and reaffirmed. They also have to be implemented. During these 2 weeks, we have made efforts to set the stage for next year's review conference. In preparing for this, we cannot disregard the global security environment, nor the challenges that it brings. This makes our shared responsibility to preserve and by implementation strengthen the NPT even more urgent. The dialogue to reach common ground must go on. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Sweden for her intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Switzerland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to follow up on the Swedish statement just read, and I would like to join others in thanking you for your wise and skilled leadership of our session of the Preparatory Committee. Our gratitude also extends to your team and also to the Secretariat. Under your leadership, we have been able to take forward the different decisions required for the organization of the review conference. We are also grateful for your efforts towards fulfilling the mandate of the Third Preparatory Committee to adopt recommendations on substantive matters to be addressed to the review conference. The difficulties to adopt these recommendations underline the challenge that we'll have to meet at the review conference to come to a positive outcome. We are nonetheless encouraged by a number of elements that emerged over the past 2 weeks. Many exchanges were constructive and underlined a large degree of convergence in a number of key areas. I would like to underline 3 in particular. There certainly is common ground that the NPT is essential to global security. The need and readiness to reaffirm our commitment to the treaty has been the golden thread throughout this preparatory committee. It has also been repeatedly underlined that the NPT is and must remain the cornerstone of nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation, an element that we would consider of central importance to avoid any erosion of the regime. The 50th anniversary of the treaty constitutes an important occasion for the NPT community to come together and reaffirm its continued validity and centrality. Secondly, there is also broad convergence on the fact that the outcomes of the past review conferences constitute a fundamental acquis to be adhered to and to be implemented. Also, some new measures may be necessary to take forward this acquis or to address new challenges. Some have underlined past outcomes represent a floor, not a ceiling. Thirdly, balance will be an important element going forward. Implementation of the three pillars of the treaty remains essential. This is obvious for the effectiveness of the treaty for realizing its objectives. But it is also necessary, as overall progress will be difficult unless it happens in every pillar. Sustained attention will have to be paid to all three dimensions. Such elements of convergence should guide our work going forward. It will be key in contributing to a successful 2020 review conference. Steady and sustained preparations will also be required in view of the challenges that are to be met for the review conference. We are looking forward to working under the stewardship of Ambassador Grossi and would like to assure him of our full support as he assumes the review conference presidency. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Switzerland for her statement. I have Japan, United States, Iran, Indonesia, Thailand, and Philippines. I would like to ask if the statements are on item 11. Otherwise, I will open the floor for closing remarks, which some of you have been making. That concludes our agenda on item 11. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make some brief closing remarks. Oh, sorry, it's on. Just want to make some brief closing remarks. The role of the PrepCom chair is a difficult one, and we appreciate the time and effort you put into leading our work these past 2 weeks. As we are also concluding the third and final session of the Preparatory Committee for the 2020 Review Conference, I would like to thank the Netherlands and Poland for their outstanding work in chairing the 2017 and 2018 Preparatory Committee meetings. We appreciate the hard work that the three PrepCom chairs have put into leading preparations for next year's review conference. The series of regional and other consultations and the close coordination between the members of the Leadership Bureau during this review cycle has set the standard for future review cycles. The United States also looks forward to working with the three PrepCom chairs as they take up their roles as the chairs of the main committees during the review conference. Also, I would be remiss if I did not thank the NPT Secretariat staff for their tireless efforts in ensuring the review cycle meetings run efficiently and effectively. While the importance of strong leadership during the Preparatory Committee meetings cannot be overstated, we cannot achieve success in the review cycle without a capable RevCon president. I commend our colleagues for working collaboratively together during this PrepCom to advance this issue of key importance to all NPT parties. The United States has full confidence that Ambassador Grossi is up to the task, and he has our full support in his efforts to guide the 2020 Review Conference towards a successful outcome. The selection of the president-designate was a major task for this PrepCom, and while it was a difficult process, a successful outcome was achieved. Mr. Chairman, the other main task of the PrepCom is to develop consensus recommendations for the review conference. That this task is daunting is evident in the fact that it has never been achieved. While the prospects for success were always slim, during the past days we have only succeeded in moving farther apart. As such, the chairman's working paper cannot serve as a basis of work for next year's review conference. Furthermore, our deliberations here serve to highlight that getting agreement among all NPT parties on any outcome in 2020 will be an incredibly difficult task. However, it is a task we cannot abandon. During the 2020 Review Conference, we will be marking the 50th anniversary of the treaty's entry into force, and we must rededicate ourselves to ensuring the treaty continues for another 50 years and beyond. The RevCon is an important opportunity for all NPT parties to reflect on what they've accomplished in realizing the shared benefits embodied in the NPT, reaffirming their commitment to the NPT, and rededicating themselves to preserving and further strengthening the NPT regime. But above all, we must look forward. During all three sessions of this PrepCom, NPT parties voiced strong support for the treaty and its critical role in international security. This collective recognition of the value of the NPT and the shared benefits it provides must serve as the starting point for 2020. We can achieve a positive outcome only if we are prepared to focus on what unites us, the shared goals and interests that the treaty embodies, and to abandon divisive and unrealistic agendas that, in the end, would prove futile and fruitless. Mr. Chairman, in closing, let me thank you once again for your efforts during this third meeting of the 2020 NPT review cycle. The NPT has made and will continue to make the world far safer and more prosperous by limiting the proliferation of nuclear weapons and by serving as the foundation for nuclear disarmament and the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. As we look forward to 2020, the United States remains committed to working with all NPT parties to keep the treaty strong, vibrant, and effective in serving our shared goals. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the distinguished representative of the United States for his statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Japan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to reiterate your hard work. Thank you for that leadership. And particularly, I have been very impressed by the very adept time management throughout the third session of the Preparatory Committee. Japan welcomes the adoption of all decisions on procedural matters related to the 2020 review conference during this session, including the election of the president. This enables us to fully concentrate on substantive matters in the coming 12 months. Mr. Chairman, now is the time to work hard on narrowing the divergence of views on the implementation of the treaty. Every state needs to exercise maximum flexibility for implementation. Here, I would like to reflect upon 5 important points that we believe deserve further consideration and discussion. First, with regard to nuclear disarmament, we should tirelessly advance pragmatic and practical measures as an implementation of Article 6 of the NPT. CTBT, FMCT, transparency, and nuclear disarmament verification are some of the important parts of building blocks that state parties are able to support. We are encouraged that some nuclear weapon states are committed to engaging with nuclear risk reduction. It is possible to seek more specific measures on this matter. Second, disarmament and non-proliferation education, as well as diversity, including integration agenda perspective, are important cross-cutting issues. We have heard so many supportive comments here. And in this regard, I would like to highlight the joint statement on disarmament and non-proliferation education presented by the delegation, myself, which was co-sponsored by 55 states. Third, on regional issues, Japan emphasizes that the entire NPT community should engage proactively on the issue of the establishment of a zone free of weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East, given its impact on the NPT regime. Japan also continues to work with the international community on regional issues such as North Korea and Iran. Fourth, Japan strongly supports the IAEA's efforts to make its safeguards more effective and efficient. Fifth, we believe that the idea of holding regional workshops on the issue, on the issue of peaceful uses of nuclear energy is valuable in creating positive momentum leading up to the 2020 review conference. Mr. Chairman, challenges are ahead of us, but we must work together towards the 2020 review conference. We will continue to support and contribute to the work of the Bureau and the leadership Ambassador Mario Grossi. Japan is more than ready to continue to be actively engaged in future discussions, making use of creative inputs by distinguished experts, including those of the group of eminent persons, and engagement with our civil society to achieve successful outcome in the upcoming review conference. To conclude, I would like to encourage all the delegations to consider securing high-level participation at the 2020 review conference in order to demonstrate a strong commitment of the international community to the NPT. In the first PrepCon, Japan Minister Kishida participated, and second PrepCon, Minister Kono participated, and this time Parliament Vice Minister Tsuji participated. So I hope that the high-level participation would be really important to draw the country's awareness of the significance of the NPT. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the distinguished representative of Japan for his intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Indonesia is taking the floor on behalf of the group of non-aligned movement parties to the NPT. The group would like to express our gratitude on your excellent stewardship in this important endeavor. We would like to also thank the Secretariat and interpreters for the smooth commencements of this preparatory committee. The group looks forward to working with all state parties on the forthcoming review conference. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Indonesia for his intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Thailand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have the honor to deliver this closing statement on behalf of the member states of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, namely Brunei, Darussalam, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos People's Democratic Republic, Malaysia, Myanmar, the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. Allow me at this time to also extend our sincere appreciation to you and your entire team, Mr. Chair, for your impressive leadership of this PrepCom meeting. Through your extensive and inclusive consultation, both ahead of and during our formal proceedings, you illustrated to the committee the importance you place on exerting our efforts to find a convergence of views and a firm path ahead. Considering the challenging circumstances, Mr. Chair, these efforts were very much welcome, necessary, and pivotal in leading us to the finalization of many critical aspects ahead of the RepCon, including the presidency. Although we were not able to agree on consensus recommendations at this PrepCom meeting, the discussions we had here were conducted in a respectful and constructive manner and are critical in preparing us for our deliberations next year. We thank you also, Mr. Chair, in this regard for the submission of your working paper. At the RepCon next year, we will be celebrating milestones where it becomes incumbent upon us all to collectively renew and concretize our efforts to strengthen this cornerstone of the global non-proliferation and disarmament regime. ASEAN reiterates its strong commitment to move forward the global non-proliferation and disarmament agenda. We continue to call on all member states, particularly the nuclear weapon states, to demonstrate good faith, promote mutual understanding, enhance trustworthy cooperation, and ensure responsible collective actions in striving for a world without nuclear weapons. It is our common goal to see humanity thrive in a safe and secure environment, free from fear, animosity, and devastation caused by nuclear weapons. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Thailand for his intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Philippines.
Mr. Chair, the Philippine delegation wishes to congratulate you, Ambassador Said Hasrin, and your team for leading us under difficult circumstances with competence in a very transparent and inclusive manner during the last year of the preparatory process. During the PrepCom, and especially in the past months, many states have expressed concerns that under the prevailing global security environment, it was not realistic to expect outcomes from this process. We believe that building trust and confidence is key. Nevertheless, the spirit of engagement displayed by the states parties was commendable, and we are pleased that the way forward on the presidency of the review conference was achieved. This is positive and encouraging as we begin our work on the review conference, and the Philippines expresses its full support for the prospective president of the upcoming RevCon, Ambassador Rafael Grossi. The Philippines believes that proposals to strengthen the NPT process by improving our working methods merit our consideration if we are to ensure, in the words of Undersecretary General Nakamitsu, that they are fit for purpose for the next 50 years of the treaty. We need innovation as much as continuity and steadfastness to keep the NPT process robust and effective. More importantly, we also recognize that the resumption of positive engagement between concerned nuclear weapon states to address bilateral issues on arms control and disarmament in the coming months and other constructive steps, especially by the nuclear weapon states, even if outside the NPT process, will be critical in preparing the stage for a successful review conference. Again, the Philippines stresses the importance of building trust and confidence among member states, particularly among nuclear weapon states, by engaging in an open, inclusive, and transparent dialogue. This delegation is encouraged by the states parties' shared sense that we should all endeavor to facilitate the success of the review conference with a level of ambition that befits the milestone celebration of the 50th anniversary. Yes, we should reaffirm previous commitments, and beyond this, we should pursue forward-looking, action-oriented outcomes to implement obligations in the treaty 50 years following its entry into force. Then, as now, our shared vision for a peaceful and secure world without nuclear weapons holds true. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Philippines for his intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cuba.
Gracias.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of the Cuban delegation, we'd like to congratulate you for your intensive efforts during this complex task. We'd also like to convey to you and your team our recognition and appreciation for the untiring efforts you've made for your transparency and the inclusivity in your work. We also appreciate the factual summary presented as to your responsibility and the procedural decisions that are to be taken for the conference, electing members of the Bureau, rules of procedure, and so forth. We also appreciate the Secretariat's efforts as well as those of the interpreters for their well-deserved efforts. We appreciate your efforts to achieve a consensus and congratulate you on your mandate for this third PrepCom. We are working actively based on our principled position that nuclear disarmament is and should be the highest priority in disarmament. Positions reflected in this preparatory committee and the impossibility of achieving substantive recommendations once again show that there is still a huge breach between rhetoric and good intentions that are repeated time and again by some nuclear weapon states and the commitments and steps to be taken in order to make that a reality. Mr. Chairman, in the NPT review conference next year, we need to move above and beyond in order to truly achieve implementation of the recommendations for the treaty and adopt a timetable with specific action, which is well defined and geared to action towards the complete elimination of all nuclear weapons. We must work in order to achieve concrete results and assure ourselves that never again will our agreements be postponed in time and history. We believe that the action plan for disarmament adopted in 2010 and the document proposed by the chair should serve as a starting point for our work next year. We cannot accept any focus that would be a pretext for preserving the status quo, which is immoral and which would indefinitely postpone the complete elimination of all nuclear weapons. Disarmament cannot continue to be a continually postponed and conditioned objective, and that is why we urge ratification, signing and ratification of the complete ban on all nuclear weapons as an effective way to work towards verifiably and irreversibly prohibiting and eliminating all nuclear weapons. Mr. Chairman, unfortunately, all the agreements achieved in the NPT review conferences in 95, 2000, 2010 have not been fulfilled due to a lack of political will by some states, and that would include specific nuclear weapon states and others who feel they are protected by the so-called nuclear umbrella. And thus we hope that the 2020 NPT review conference will be different, and we will take the very needed step forward in the direction we need to. We need to work more intensively in the NPT Review Conference and bring about a world that is completely free of nuclear weapons. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Cuba for her intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Nigeria.
Mr. Chair, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the African Group. The African Group most sincerely extends its appreciation to you, Mr. Chair, for the leadership, openness, patience, and bravery with which you have guided our work during this session. The African Group also extends its gratitude to your team, the Secretariat, the interpreters who have worked tirelessly throughout. As we come to the end of this session and look toward the review conference next year, the African Group will continue to work constructively with all state parties of the NPT. We wish the delegations traveling a very safe journey. Once again, the African Group thanks you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Nigeria for his statement. I have 7 more speakers on my list. I appeal that it should be concise so that we can finish by 1 p.m. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I congratulate you for steering the work of the committee so skillfully. We count on your able leadership in guiding our deliberation on nuclear disarmament next year. Due to the consequence of the treaty's 50th anniversary with the 2020 Review Conference, it is a special event where we must review the treaty's operation in the past 50 years. Our past lesson should guide the treaty's future. The treaty's operation with respect to the non-proliferation is an absolute success story. Conversely, its operation on nuclear disarmament is a complete failure. This is the treaty's main chronic challenge. It is like a heart disease which needs immediate attention. If NPT's heart fails, non-proliferation will completely collapse. Non-nuclear weapon states are completely frustrated by the 50 years lack of progress on nuclear disarmament as a result of such a meaningless notion as a strategic stability, international security environment, a step-by-step approach, and now creating condition for nuclear disarmament. They serve only one purpose, a delay tactic. Over the past 50 years, the graciousness and patience of the non-nuclear weapon states have been abused and responded by bullying. The living example is the nuclear policy of the US. After 50 years of non-compliance with the explicit legal obligation under Article 6, it is now planned to spend $1.2 trillion over the nuclear arsenal. It presently threatens non-nuclear weapon states with the nuclear weapons. It is shamelessly neglected all its commitment that has undertaken in 1995, 2000, and 2010. It indicated in 2015 that for the US, the illegal and illegitimate interest of a Zionist regime, a non-NPT party, is more important than that of the around 190 state party to the treaty, as well as their consensus resolution in 1995 and their decision in the 2010 on the establishment of a nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East. And the list is go on and on. This 50-year-old non-compliance must come to an end. Therefore, the only focus on the 2020 Review Conference must be to agree on negotiation and conclusion of a comprehensive convention on nuclear weapon, which is the long-standing demand of the non-aligned movement, and to start implementing all unimplemented decisions of the past review conferences, and above all, Resolution 1995 on the Middle East. Obviously, promoting the full realization of the inherent right of the peaceful users of the nuclear energy should be among other priorities issues. Finally, in the review conference, We will fully cooperate with all delegations who are willing to work toward evolving it to a turning point in realizing the long overdue objective of a nuclear disarmament. We must agree on the phase program within the context of a comprehensive convention on nuclear weapons in order to consume all nuclear weapons together before they consume us all together. This is what we need to the security of our own, our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and the generation to come. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran for his remarks. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of South Africa.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Chair. Permit me to join the NAC, Nigeria, speaking on behalf of the African group, and Indonesia, speaking on behalf of the non-aligned movement, in thanking you for the excellent way in which you've conducted this PREPCOM. We're grateful to you for your sterling leadership. You listened to us and did the best that you could to ensure that we were able to cohere around a basis that could have been a platform for us to begin the negotiations or the discussions when we get to the review conference. We are pleased that not all is lost, that you will submit Rev 1 in the form of the chair's working paper, together also with your impressions of the work that's been done. We fully support that. It will assist us to be able to start from somewhere. We're also grateful to the Secretariat, the interpreters, and everybody that enabled us to be able to conduct our work. South Africa fundamentally believes in the Non-Proliferation Treaty, its spirit and intent as part of the regimen globally to ensure that we rid humanity of weapons of mass destruction. And that is why we exerted ourselves in the indefinite extension of the NPT. So next year, as we mark the 50th anniversary of the NPT, we will also be marking the 25th anniversary of the indefinite extension of the NPT, which wasn't easy, which cannot we cannot forget the challenges that we had when we reached a point where we had to decide on the indefinite extension of the NPT. This places an enormous responsibility on all of us to continue to strive for the legitimacy of the treaty, but also validate the spirit with which the treaty was indefinitely extended in 1995. And central to both the credibility of the treaty and also the indefinite extension of the treaty is the review process, that it must continue to deliver credible outcomes that give a sense that we are implementing the articles of the treaty. So the review conference will occur at a critical time, a quarter of a century later, after we indefinitely extended it. And South Africa looks forward to a full set of outcomes across the board and stands ready to work with all the member states to ensure that we are able to prove to the world that we did the right thing in 1995, that the treaty works and we're committed to it. On its own, it doesn't say anything, the treaty. What gives it content and meaning is progress that is accomplished in the fulfillment of the obligations, warranting and validating the decisions taken in 1995 under President Nelson Mandela, for us as South Africa, who was first president of the country and firmly believed that the indefinite extension was the right thing to do. We hope to prove him right. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of South Africa for her remarks. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
شكرا السيد الرئيس.
Thank you very much, Chair. My delegation would like to thank you for the leadership that you have demonstrated and the excellent and wise leadership that you've demonstrated. We'd also like to thank your team, the Secretariat, the interpreters, and all of those who have contributed to the success of our work. Chair, you've worked very seriously to bring points of view closer together. And we believe that the amendment and the revision, the first revision of the draft final document, enjoyed a broad support by member states. Chair, the review conference will have to face many challenges. We must put an end to the ongoing violations of the treaty. And moreover, the non-compliance of articles, and particularly Articles 1 and 2 of the treaty. The upcoming conference must allow us to agree on practical and specific measures for us to be able to create a zone free from nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East. Otherwise, the credibility of the treaty will be under great threat. Thank you very much indeed.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Syrian Arab Republic for his remark. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Mexico.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm taking the floor briefly to join in congratulating you on your work and congratulating your team as well. I'd also like to extend our support from this time to the new team and the appointed chair, Ambassador Ambrosis, for their efforts, that it be expedited and effective, and you can count on the support of Mexico in that regard. I'd just like to share a small reflection, and that is that in the review conference, as the name would indicate, we will be meeting to review implementation and functioning of the treaty. There's not that much space then for opinions or will there. It also relates to factual events and the information we have at hand as to how the treaty is doing. We will be paying very careful attention to the revised text that you'll be presenting as a working document as to your views of how the NPT treaty is working. And we believe it's important to study it so that we can start our work towards the review conference. But I'd just like to reiterate that we shouldn't forget that we are supposed to be reviewing how the treaty works, how well it's working, rather than taking sides, one view or another in our work. And again, thank you. And again, you can rest assured of our support. Thank you, sir.
I thank the distinguished representative of Mexico for her remarks. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Australia.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't planning to speak. I already thanked you, your team, and the Secretariat earlier. Most states parties won't have had a chance to read your reflections yet, but I have just read them, and I just really wanted to commend you on these reflections. They're authentic, genuine, forward-looking, honest, and short. It's only 8 paragraphs, and while I'm sure there are many, many working papers that we may not have all read thoroughly, this is 8 paragraphs that I commend to all state parties to read and keep with us as we prepare for 2020. The tone of this document is what we need for our preparations. Congratulations and thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Australia for her remarks. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the European Union.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Conscious of the time, I would be brief in my remarks, but we would not like to end this session without expressing the EU's appreciation for your able stewardship of the deliberations, which led this PrepCom to the successful conclusion, particularly on the procedural aspects. We'd like to thank also the Secretariat and the interpreters for their hard work and support during these last couple of weeks. And we'd also like to congratulate Ambassador Grossi and the other members of the Bureau for their election, and to assure you and them of our full support moving towards the 2020 NPT RevCon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the distinguished representative of the European Union for her remarks. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Argentina.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would like to start by also extending my thanks and my gratitude to all those individual delegations and groups who have been generous enough to wish me well for the work that I'm going together with my team to undertake now. I think also thanks are in order to you and to your team. You came to this high responsibility late in the game and in an impressive manner. In a very short time, you consulted everyone, you listened to everyone, and you've steered us through what I think has been a good PrepCom, which has taken all the necessary decisions in spite of some difficulties that we had. I'm grateful for the fact that you helped us get to my own nomination as president, which is going to allow me now to undertake the work which is so much needed. I want to say that as far as I'm concerned, once you gavel this meeting to its end, my work starts. I don't think we start the review next year. We are starting now. We're starting now because we have listened and we have heard views that indicate that important differences remain in some aspects of the treaty. So the obligation now, the responsibility now is to look into what's possible and to look in what, as many said already now in this session, look into what unites us and what can be put to good use to ensure the strengthening of the treaty. As of Monday, I'm going to start working on a very ambitious plan of consultations and meetings which are going to take place in all corners of the world. We're going to be reaching out to all of you in Asia, in Africa, in Europe, in Latin America, and the Caribbean. The NPT is a global effort, and we need to do this. Also, and commensurate to the dimension of the challenges ahead of us, I am going to propose that we, for these consultations, before next year, have a larger, wider, bigger table, which will include taking the indispensable diplomatic and political decisions regarding the treaty, but also the nuclear community writ large, including technical support organizations, including nuclear regulators, including nuclear operators, including industry, including researchers, including also civil society, NGOs, incorporating into the discussion gender issues, incorporating into the discussion how to make sure that the younger generations are also part of this debate. It's a lot of work, but I'm not alone. And I'm sure that you will be with me every step of the way. It is clear that there are differences. We've seen that. But I take heart from the fact that it has been said, and I feel it, that there is a common understanding and a shared conviction that failure next year is in no one's interest. No one will benefit from an NPT challenged, weakened act. It is just the opposite. So as of next Monday, work starts until success next year. Thank you very much. And we continue seeing each other in New York, in Vienna, in Geneva, and everywhere. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Argentina for his remarks. Excellencies, dear colleagues, allow me to take a few moments to deliver some remarks before closing this session of the Preparatory Committee. The past few months since I undertook the task of chairing this third Preparatory Committee, I have approached my role in an open, impartial, and transparent manner. As chair, I have done my best to align competing and dissenting views to establish convergence. It has been a challenging task, but I am honored by your support, candor, and friendship, and I thank you. I have found that there remains a genuine desire by all states parties, regardless of group affiliation or regardless of substantive positions, to strengthen the NPT. I have heard that in my consultations and discussions, and I believe that it is useful for that point to be made and for it to be heard more between each other and to translate that shared conviction into a common vision of where we all see the treaty heading. Indeed, the commemorative anniversaries next year have led to many reflections amongst states parties. I believe that differences in views can be bridged, but the extra effort and conscious desire is needed to push things forward positively. We had a number of procedural objectives in this third PrepCom. I am happy that state parties worked together and made tremendous efforts to allow for such procedural matters to be concluded smoothly and efficiently. This allowed the review conference to proceed in good stead, and I congratulate Ambassador Grossi, and I look forward to working with him next Monday. Before concluding the session, I would like to extend on behalf of the state parties participating in the PrepCom, as well as on my own behalf, our sincere thanks to the High Representative for Disarmament Affairs and the representatives of the IEA for their invaluable support to our endeavors. I also extend my sincere thanks to Ambassador Marjolein van Dillen and Ambassador Adam Bugashki for assisting me during this session. I also thank Ambassador Rob Gabrielsi for his role in the process. Together with Ambassador Grossi, I am confident that the close coordination and support within the Bureau will continue. I would also like to convey my heartfelt thanks to the Secretariat led by the Secretary of the Committee, Mr. Iwan Tudor, for their tireless and considerable efforts to support and facilitate our work throughout the session. All of them are, in my view, the fourth pillar of the NPT. I also thank the members of my team who have supported me throughout the process. Special thanks go to all the interpreters, translators, record keepers, conference officers, and sound engineers who have worked diligently behind the scenes in support of the committee's work. And finally, thank you to all of you, the stakeholders of the NPT, states parties, intergovernmental organizations, international organizations, civil society that remain committed to this important and essential instrument. We will all see each other soon. I declare the session closed.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Fantastic.